turnout. This is amazing. Welcome on this chilly night. It's cozy in here. We have 2 microphones, and I'm just going to do my best to just be loud and yell. So thank you for being here. We're so excited to do this. And I don't know how many of you have read both of the books, so I'm going to do something that I don't usually do and ask each of the authors to tell us a little bit about their book in case you have read one and not the other. We want you to have a nice introduction from the authors themselves. So Lily, why don't you begin?
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming. It's really sweet. I'm really honored to be here with both of you. Thank you. You'd think I'd have my elevator pitch really well down at this point, but I would say it is a book about a college senior who goes on a bad date with a smart guy and sort of sets in motion a number of things that take place in the next 30 years of her life. You have a college section, and then part 2, you make a 21-year jump, and then you make another jump in time. And it is really about that first big love that you had and all the emotions that go with it. And many, many different kinds of love, really, in the end, the way love can change and, kind of resonate in different ways. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Yes, okay. Speaking of college seniors, we've got one here too. Alison is also about a college senior, Rachel, who has her classmate has just been murdered, and she is on the staff of her college paper, and she's trying to figure out what exactly happened. And so she's investigating this, but not only is she investigating it, she's keeping from her colleagues on the newspaper that she actually knew the girl who was murdered. They've known each other since they were 6 years old. And really the book is about her reflecting back to the Alison that she knew, what happened to her, and the guilt she feels at the role she might have played in Alison's demise. Yeah. So my first book, Superhost, takes place in London, which is my other kind of another where I spend a lot of time. I love London, and I love writing books in London. It's just endless, the stories you can tell about London. But I wanted to kind of go back to where I'm from and my roots in Maine. And there's so many books about Maine, so many of them. But also most of them take place on the coast. And they're a part of, and I love Portland, I live in Portland, but I grew up in Waterville, Maine, which is a very, very different place. And basically, you grew up in Waterville, Maine, you've probably never had a lobster roll. Why would you? And so it's like, it's a completely different community. And so I wanted to write about that Maine, this sort of small town Maine where they have a Walmart and a rundown pub and a couple of schools, and it's kind of like any sort of working class small town. And these are their lives, but they also happen to have this liberal arts college right smack in the middle of it, where all of these kids from Connecticut and Boston and New York are coming up and living in this small town and kind of taking over this campus. So there's a lot of, that kind of clashing of different classes and how they come together in these small towns in Maine. And I really wanted to write about that because I grew up in one of those towns and then I went to that school. So I saw it from both sides and I wanted to tell it from both sides as well. Yeah.
So interesting. I've lived in Maine now for, 22 years. And I had lived there as in my 20s as well. And I always vowed that I would get back there. And then finally I did. And it takes me a long time to write about a place. And so this is my, maybe I have a short story set in Maine, possibly. I can't really think. But there's really 25 pages of this book is set in Maine. Just one part of her life. And so I can't, and it's definitely on the coast. It's like a little park scene, and then they go home for dinner, and that's it. And so I'm putting my toe in the water very slowly, writing about Maine. I feel like, I really have to know a place and get some distance. So that's coming slowly, I think.
But it's also kind of the perfect place to write. I mean, that's kind of like why we live there.
Place to write. And there's such an amazing amazing writers community there. And it's so tight and wonderful. And I didn't know that when I moved here at all. And
Well, and it just keeps growing.
it's, it really is extraordinary.
I'm so curious about this idea of coming of age. You know, college is the first time sort of a lot of us are on our own. We're deciding, who are we? What do we want? We're so idealistic about the world in a lot of ways, and we have this vision of who we're going to be and what we're going to do and how we're going to define ourselves in this world. So I'm curious about growing up and identity and the themes of just figuring out, who am I going to be in this world? So how did you build your characters in this time? Why was that important to you? And do your characters correlate to you at all? Did you draw from any life experiences or characteristics to form your characters? Lily?
I think that what I was interested in with our character, whose name, or technically it's really her nickname, is Jordan, and she gets nicknamed that by the two guys that she meets in the very, very beginning of the book. And she's a senior, and she's kind of coasted. You know, she's been a good student for most of her life, and in college she's been a perfectly fine student. But then she meets makes these two friends who are truly intellectuals, truly intellectually ambitious and curious, and you know, kind of go above and beyond. And she is really, it's like a new level, and they introduce her to a whole new way of studying and seminars and theses and like, and so her world is kind of rocked by them, both intellectually, sexually, romantically. Everything sort of happens all at once, you know, in this couple of college semesters, and I was interested in all of that kind of growth, you know, just it's almost like she's coming awake, you know, to her own potential, her own ambition, and, you know, what she really wants and how to get it. I mean, she's just had vague ideas about maybe being a writer, and now she sees she has to be serious if she wants that to happen.
They crystallized for her.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely drew on some of my own emotions from my college years, and, you know, what that felt like. You know, I did have my own sort of love triangle situation, so I drew a little bit on that as well.
Tell us more.
It was tricky. It was tricky. But yeah, I mean, I always draw a little, you know, I always feel like my books are, you know, a little bit my own experience, certainly a lot of my own emotions, a lot of what I've read, stories people have told me, and my imagination, and it all gets kind of mixed up, and every novel is sort of a strange little combination of all of those things.
But I think that's something anyone can relate to, right? We meet someone, whether it's a partner or a friend, and they feel different parts of us.
Exactly.
And I think she experiences
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's like, well, I really love this about this person, but that person makes me feel this. So that, I think that helps us relate to the story so much.
That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar for me. Part of it was that I went to junior high and college in the same town. And this book takes place in junior high and in college. And so I wanted to tell the story of basically of these two girls who are both at the same schools at the same time, and what they know about each other. And that happened for me in college too, where a couple of times kids would come who I sort of knew in high school or junior high. And it's sort of, they know this former you, and you know, I mean, even like last year, I bumped into a guy who knew me in college, and we both sort of knew each other when we were in a fairly awkward phase that I don't think either one of us wants to remember, and so we were just kind of like trying to dance around the conversation of like, yeah, do you remember that? Yeah, but we were with all these other people, and we didn't want them to know anything about it. It was so strange, and I've got to see him again on Saturday, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be strange now because now I've written this book about it. This was born out of, so Rachel is, trying to find out what happened to her classmate who died, and that was my jumping off point, because when I was in college, I was an editor on my college newspaper, and one of my classmates was murdered. None of that, yeah, I know. None of that. That's where it ends. So I did not know her. I don't think we'd ever had a conversation, but her death rocked me, largely because it was that moment where you sort of realize as a young woman, shit, I'm not safe. Yeah. And how does that sort of, her life go on from that point? So the book has a kind of a thriller vibe to it, but it isn't really. It's really a coming of age story, and sort of what it is that we go back in time and think, okay, how did this moment just change my life? And in ways that you sort of don't even anticipate that it's going to do. I mean, she thinks the trauma happened in junior high. Well, she hasn't even experienced the trauma yet. Yeah.
Did you know the ending of the story before you wrote it, or did it evolve as you went? I
pretty much knew. I knew that, it's difficult to talk about this without giving anything away, but I knew there was one certain thing that I wanted to have happen, which, and that goes along with the idea that this is always meant to be a book that was more about these two women than, it's not the kind of thriller where you're really sort of chasing to find who the killer is, because when we do find the killers in these stories, it almost never matters. It almost never makes us feel like, oh, thank God. It's in my experience, when we found out who killed my college classmate, it didn't seem to make a lick of difference in anybody's mind about what had happened. So there's that element to this. I wanted it to be about these two girls and not about him. The him. Yeah. Yeah.
Each author is going to read an excerpt, so we'd love to hear a piece of it in their own voice. Do you want to start, Lily?
Sure.
I can hold the microphone for you if you'd like.
Oh, no, I'm great.
Okay.
Yeah, just have to take off my glasses. It's so interesting because there's a little tiny part in my college. It's in here, and it also happened to me, where I knew somebody who was murdered as well. Do you remember that?
Well, yeah, when I was reading it, I was like, did we write the same book? And
yeah.
then obviously
It's so funny. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, mine's like, you don't even know why it's there. Yeah. And well, barely gets, I mean, I tried to get it mentioned a little bit, but it's so interesting that you took that and then just like, made a whole book about it. But I'm terrified of like a murder mystery. I tried one once and it was a disaster. Yeah. But so I just want to ask you so many more questions. Like, do you read a lot of murder mysteries?
I don't read that many. I am obsessed with British crime dramas.
Oh.
Yeah. I watch them all the time.
Yeah, wow. Okay. That was my problem. Is I had none. Okay, I'm just going to read from the beginning, 2 pages. You knew I'd write a book about you someday. You said once I'd dredged up the whole hit parade minus you. I'll never know how you'd tell it. For me, it begins here, like this. The professor is holding up 2 neon orange pieces of paper. Despite its vulgar packaging, he says, waving a page in each hand like a flagman at Daytona, I feel compelled to read this one aloud. The assignment had been to write a contemporary version of Bacon's essay, History of Life and Death. I'd waited to the last minute to write it. The only paper we had in the house was this thick stuff left over from our Halloween party, and it wasn't easy feeding that cardstock into my typewriter. The professor doesn't read it as much as perform it. He gives it far more life and humor than I imagined it had. There are 2 smart guys in the class. They sit up front together, and I only see the backs of their heads, one with coppery brown hair and the other with a thick black ponytail. The professor runs things by them so often I assume they're his grad school TAs. When my essay gets passed back to me, they both turn to watch where it goes. After that day, the copper-haired one begins migrating back. 3 classes later, he takes a seat beside me. Soon he is walking me across campus to modern furniture, the only art history class that wasn't full by the time I signed up. Our 17th century lit class has only about 30 people, but modern furniture is held in an auditorium with cushioned seats set on a steep slope down to the professor at his podium. Behind him is a big screen that flashes pictures of Corbusier's B306 chaise longue and Bauhaus nesting tables. I catch up on a lot of sleep in that class. Sam has short, halting steps and speaks in fits and starts too, little articulate bursts, then a good bit of silence. We talk exclusively about the class. He's not focusing enough on Cromwell, he says, and how resistance to him galvanized the imagination of this whole generation of writers. I agree. What else can I do? I am a mere student, and he is a scholar. That much is clear right away. I've never met a scholar who wasn't a professor, and Sam isn't even a grad student. He's a senior like me. Later, I go to the library and read about who Cromwell was, and the next time we walk to Modern Furniture, I make a very small joke about the rump parliament. Sam's laugh is soundless, more like panting. He asks me if I've seen The Deer Hunter, and I say yes, and I figure he's going to make a comparison somehow with the Venatore, the hunter, and the Complete Angler. Instead, he asked me if I want to see it again with him. It's playing on campus Friday night. So that's how it begins. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to ask a question first, because in reading this book, I'm thinking to myself, these two opposite thoughts. You know how some people tell you, what's meant for you will never miss you. You know, your fate is there. It's kind of sealed for you. But then there's this idea of, if you want something, are you supposed to fight for it? And how hard are you supposed to fight for it? And it made me think of that in this book. What do you think? Did you want us to think that? Am I thinking not what you wanted us to think? I got to the end and I thought, are people supposed to fight harder for what they want? Is this the way it was supposed to be? This idea of fate versus control. Talk to me about that.
Wow, okay, big question. I don't want the reader to feel anything. Like, I am definitely not giving a prescription. I'm just trying to lay out like the scaffolding of a story and a kind of emotional arc. And then the reader applies their imagination and their experiences and thoughts and feelings and emotions and everything and creativity. And that, so I really do believe that every book is really an individual experience given the person who's reading it. And so I am so fine with one person thinking, oh yeah, like she missed the boat, she didn't fight, that sort of thing, or he did, or yeah, she dodged a bullet, and there were no mistakes, and this is the way it was meant to be. I am completely agnostic in that way.
Maybe I revealed too much about me in that. But I like that I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting one. We all have this experience of saying, is it supposed to be the way it is? Was it supposed to be different?
Yeah. And then there's that moment when they take this seminar together and they talk about Hamartia, this idea of a fatal flaw, and what exactly is the definition of a fatal flaw? Is it a divine sort of, thing within you, or is it just, you just made a mistake, And so that kind of gets at that question as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
So where are we going to read from?
Well, I'm going to go in a little bit, so I'll have to give you a little bit of information so you know where I am. This is also a classroom scene. Rachel is taking a creative writing class, and so this is the first day of this particular creative writing class. She has already handed in a story, and she's having it workshopped that day. She doesn't know who else is in the class with her until she arrives. Okay. So the professor is Professor Stannard, so that's where we're beginning. Professor Stannard's intermediate fiction workshop took place around a large oval-shaped wooden table in an annex on the top floor of the main library. The job of a novelist is to suspend reality, she told us on the first day. What better metaphor than climbing these lofty heights? You have the whole ascent to clear your mind and then the descent to reacquaint yourself with the mundane. 11 of us took a seat around the table, cheeks red with exertion. Someone was late. 3 of us were nervous, eyes darting, because we had already handed in our first stories at the end of the summer and knew our fellow classmates were trying to work out how much was autobiographical and how much was fiction. The professor was nervous too. She took a moment to sit, pushed her Harry Potter glasses up on her nose, and parted her long auburn hair over her shoulders. She laughed to herself as she looked at the low, suspended ceiling and said, also, if you want to be a writer, you got to get used to some really shit spaces. You do know that people have sex on this table. Tristan McInerney spoke up from under his low Denman College baseball cap, the visor of which he'd curled so aggressively it could be a scoop. Tristan believed the only author worth emulating was Hemingway, though he'd never say it out loud. You could just tell. He took the seat directly across the long end from Professor Stannard and waited for her to react to his question. The rest of us, about to put our books on the table, let them hover in our hands just above. I was already aware of this rumor. All last spring, Cam is her boyfriend, Cam had tried to convince me to have sex on the table that was nicknamed the Good Wood. There was apparently a sign-up board in the men's second-floor bathroom. Cam eventually got sick of hearing me say no and stopped asking, but I knew if I told him I now had a class around it, he would certainly renew his campaign, so I planned to keep my mouth shut. Stannard, who had already dropped a stack of papers on the table, now looked down at them, then across the 12-foot length, eventually making eye contact with Tristan at the other end. Well, I suppose the dimensions are too irresistible not to. Next time, I'll bring Lysol. I positioned myself centrally on the long side that was the closest to the far wall, so I could see the door, a compulsion I had. I didn't necessarily need to be close to the door, but I needed to be able to see it. We'll give our straggler another minute, and then we'll begin with Rachel. She smiled at me. She smiled in my direction. I smiled back nervously and said, uh-oh. Nonsense, and you know it, she said. Stannard checked her watch and then gave the open door another long stare. I reread the first line of my story. There's one in every year. In our year, she was Alice. I have the power to summon with my eyes, Stannard said to a chorus of laughs. I look up from my story, and there she was. Alison took the empty seat next to Stannard. I had an appointment that ran late. She tucked her brown curls behind her ears and looked around the table. I'm sorry to keep everyone waiting. Her eyes fell on me. I smiled, but she didn't smile back. Who wants to get the ball rolling, Stannard said. What do we think about Rachel's story? I like the title, Tragic, said the girl sitting next to me. Chelsea, I think her name was. I like the double meaning because, kids use that word to be mean, but also, the story itself is pretty tragic. While Chelsea spoke, Alison kept her head down, flipping through her stapled blue-inked pages of the story. Stannard nodded. I agree. Rachel has an instinct for honing in on a meaty word and letting it do the work. Is it manipulative? Everyone looked at Alison, stunned. No likes, no maybes, just a simple question. Interesting, Stannard said to Alison. Expand. Is it leading? Is the author, is Rachel telling us what to think before we've even read the opening sentence? When she said my name, it was with no familiarity whatsoever. Her eyes passed over me, a stranger in her midst. Stannard nodded. You don't consider this to be part of the author's role, to guide the reader? I think the story pities Alice, but she doesn't necessarily understand her. The narrator thinks she's telling Alice's story, but actually she's telling her own. She looked at me dead in the eyes. Whose story is it? Stannard regarded me. She had a rule in her classes that authors could only speak when asked a direct question. Interesting point, particularly because the narrator is never given a name. Your thoughts, Rachel? I swallowed and looked down at my own words, now jumbling in front of me. Well, I think the narrator is conflicted. I don't know that she necessarily wants the reader to pity Alice. Just then, I locked eyes with Alison again. It's more like she wants the reader to understand the nature of cruelty. For a moment, nobody says anything. They just stare at me. Tristan finally lifts both his hands and shrugs his shoulders. And what's that exactly? When I answered, I didn't bother looking at Tristan. I held Alison's gaze, that we're all capable of it.
There's some work with remembering and memory in this story, and I'm wondering why that was something you wanted to play with. I mean, memories are tricky.
Yeah.
And what we remember and how we remember it, because two people can look at the same thing and see two very different things. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, and and that's what's happening in this book, and that scene was a fun scene for me to write. Genuinely, I did not know Alison was going to walk into that classroom until she did. So it was a wonderful moment for me because I knew what Rachel's short story was. In fact, in early drafts of the book, I think the short story that she'd written was part of it, and then I ended up removing it. And so it was kind of, I wanted, and I think I'd shared it, my dad's a writer, and I'd shared a copy of this with him, and he had said to me, he said, okay, Kate, he's like, he read an early draft, and he said, whose story is this? Is it Rachel's or is it Alison's? And I was like, oh God, I don't. And it was such a big question, and it still feels like a really difficult one to answer, but I loved it so much that I had to then make it part of the novel, and that Rachel didn't really know the answer to that herself, and so Alison's question is valid about Rachel not necessarily knowing whose story she's telling, or even whose story she's living. I mean, this is about Rachel. This is about a young woman who doesn't know herself, kind of surrounded by other people who are starting to figure themselves out, and she feels a step behind. And I certainly felt that way myself in college, that I was just kind of one step behind knowing myself the way other people just seemed to. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't effortless, but it felt effortless to me the way they were doing it. But that's what I love about fiction, is that, and I'm guessing you feel the same way, that you can lie, and that's what's kind of what is Rachel's issue in this book, is that, she's on the newspaper, she's been doing journalism for years, she's gone to college to study it, she's a senior, she realized she doesn't want to be a journalist because she's kind of lost not her interest in the truth, but her interest in facts. And she's not sure she wants to go through the rest of her life just writing facts. And so she's taking these creative writing courses, trying to figure out how to tell the truth without telling the facts. But she wasn't really prepared for the subject of the story to be in the room. So that was fun to play with. And then, of course, later on in the book, Alison's written a story about Rachel too, and they workshop that one.
Oh, that's
yeah,
so great.
yeah.
So the jump forward happens much later
Yeah.
in the book.
Yes. So towards the end of the book, you read. So this actually takes place. The college years are 2016, and the junior high years are 2008. And I had sort of wanted to do that largely because I wanted to kind of sandwich it between these two presidential elections that just seemed to have an enormous effect on people, but particularly young women. And so, Rachel's in junior high, and everything is like Obama and hope, and her parents are Democrats, and they're so excited. And then they get to college, and I think the book, when Alison is murdered, is the same day that Trump gets his first national paper endorsement. And so we're sort of like, she dies, and they're like, oh God, and he's going to be elected. And then suddenly it's just this sort of moment of like, it's over for women, for these girls on campus. That's how it feels. And so I wanted to have that kind of, that hope within 8 years being demolished. And then sort of later on, her reflection on, it's not that much of a downer. I promise when she gets older, she finds bright spots again. But yeah, this is very much her revisiting the dark spots. Yeah.
And Lily, in your book, we have sort of a longer span of knowing the after compared to the start. Why was that important, that sort of maturity that the characters show and sort of looking back? They're kind of reevaluating.
Yeah, I mean, that third part was supposed to be the whole book. I mean, really, and my idea was just that the college stuff was just 20, 30 maximum pages, just so we know what the situation is going into part 3. And I don't know. They walk into that house, they go on that date for the deer hunter, and then he asks her back. He has an off-campus house that, he's taking care of for a professor, and it's just kind of the beginning of the series of the male academic privilege that she doesn't have any access to, that she's starting to understand. And she goes into that house, and I don't know, the minute I got myself like through that little gate and up the stairs and into the house, it's really the only time in the whole book where there's kind of real description. I'm not a big describer, and but I don't know, there was something that happened that I was kind of nesting, like
It felt that way. Yeah.
And I realized, we're gonna stay here for a little while. So this is not just backstory.
Yeah.
This is a real significant part of the novel. And then they do make these leaps. And what I am obsessed with, I think, in a lot of my books is just the way the past and the present rub against each other. That is just really exciting to me, and it's a particular sort of emotion, that we don't really have a word for, though I'm sure the Germans do. And I don't know. I really like that. And so when I can take something like Heart the Lover, which is the king of hearts from a card game that they play in college, and have that start to have more meaning and go into the present, and I don't know, I like to bring the reader along with those memories, and that's really, I feel like as I get older, that feeling happens more and more. You just walk down the street and there's so many things that bring back your past in so many different ways, and I just find there's a lot of tension there, and I'm interested in it.
When you said, I didn't know it was going to be like this, and then it happened in the book, what are these voices? Are they voices? Do you hear them? Do you dream about them? I need to know more about this process from both of you.
For me, it's just while I'm writing, especially dialogue, it is kind of like hearing voices. It's nothing about what I do is cerebral. It's not planned out. I'm just in the moment writing, and it's much more instinctive and from the gut in some way. It's just what feels right. I often describe it as like I feel like I'm a blind worm on the ground, but it turns out that all worms are blind, so it's a little redundant. But I do feel like I'm just groping around in the dark for things that feel truthful, not factual, but truthful. And that's the best way I can describe it. And it's a tiny bit like when you wake up in the morning, but you're still dreaming, but you kind of know you're dreaming, and maybe you can keep the cute guy from walking out the door because you kind of have a little bit of control. So it's a little bit like that, like a little bit like a dream that you have some control, but also your imagination is still working.
Yeah, I think for me it's really, really similar. This book was a bit different. So Superhost is sort of like what you said, is just being led. I just, for whatever reason with that book, I inhabited the mind of a 55-year-old man and just followed him around and fell in love with him and just sort of, and I had no idea what he was going to do on any given day. Whereas with this book, I had to essentially, we had to have the kind of whodunit quality to it. So there was a certain amount of planning. I had to get to certain points, have to lead you astray, all the different things that happen when you're sort of writing more in that thriller genre, which really, it isn't my style. And so when I have those moments where like Alison appears in a situation where I wasn't expecting her to show up, it's like, oh, great. And there's a scene where they all suddenly, Rachel's at a bar with her college boyfriend, and then suddenly everyone from junior high is like in the bar, and I wasn't expecting them to be there, and then they showed up, and it was like amazing. It's like worlds colliding. And for
show up like just in a vision?
Yeah, it was just sort of like, so basically that he's visiting her at home. He wants to go to like the diviest dive bar in town. She takes him there, and then she realizes that everyone she knew from junior high is in there. She hasn't spoken to any of them in years. And yeah, it's that wonderful moment of like, worlds colliding. And that is my absolute favorite thing to do as a writer, is just make worlds collide. Particularly for a character that, bring the past into the present, whatever. And so that was such a privilege to write that scene. I was like, oh, great, I know he's going. And there's a junior high kid by the name of Brad who he's very, very difficult, but I also love him. And he was there, and he was an adult, and what was he like as an adult? And that's kind of what I live for. I live to surprise and amuse myself. So when those things happen, that's what I love. And with this book, they were a little bit more sort of few and far between because of what I needed to do in order to make it a thriller. But yeah.
Write and delete and go back, or is this a knowing that you have?
Yeah. With the first book, obviously it was edited several times, but it didn't really change that much. We honed it in. I think we ended up cutting like 100 pages from it, but it was still, the core of it was like, this is the story, we followed him, nothing really changed. Whereas this, I think I probably restructured it so many times where you're literally like taking chapters and moving them. Whereas Superhost, the first sentence that I wrote is the first sentence of the book, and it stayed there. And it was much more like that kind of a writing process. Whereas this one, so many drafts of this book, and so many nearly throwing it in the bin moments. So this has been a labor of love. This one for sure. Yeah, yeah.
When you go and talk to audiences like this, is anybody ever mad about the way it turned out? What's the feedback you hear? Or they wanted something else, or they expected something else? How much interaction and criticism do you get, if any, about whether it's this book or another?
A little. I with this one, I feel like with Writers and Lovers, there was sort of Team Silas and Team Oscar, and that was fascinating to me because I was clearly on one side. But there were people would talk about going to book club and really duking it out. Like really, there would be people on both sides.
That's
and
awesome.
Yeah. And it is a personality type that will like one thing or another. And then with Euphoria, I don't want to ruin that, but there are some people who just, because it is based on it was inspired by Margaret Mead, they expected Nell Stone, my character, to have the Margaret Mead trajectory of her life, and she doesn't. Like, she's my character, and I will do with her what I will. And there were some people who were mad. Maybe, in particular, Margaret Mead's cousin. So that was awkward.
A little too close for comfort.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't get a lot. Yeah, I don't get a lot of that. Most of the time when you do these events for publicizing books, if people haven't read them yet, they've just come out. So you're you're trying to sell it to them. So they haven't really, they haven't read it yet. I actually weirdly did do a book group with this book. That it was with a bookstore in Massachusetts, and I don't think I quite realized that they were all going to come having read it, and so I sort of prepared to pitch for a book they'd already read. It was kind of a confusing set of circumstances. I think there were some pretty pissed off people in that room because it isn't your sort of traditional thriller, and they were all very nice to me, but they kept sort of asking questions, and I could just sort of work out, why don't I, it's not, is it a thriller? And I was like, that's a good question. I don't know, I'm not a thriller writer, and I learned that people who read thrillers obsessively, they are very passionate about what they read, and it was almost like, how dare you come into our, into our lane, and Superhost, my first book, was kind of like, they were, publishers, this is the thing they do, they try to bill you as one thing or another, and so that one was kind of like more in the rom-com category, which it absolutely isn't, and so people were sort of being like, but this isn't romantic, and I was like, well, I know, and so I think you do sort of find yourself, or at least I find myself, defending choices that were never my own. But no, most people in a room are always, they're lovely. I had a couple of people, one woman write to me and told me I swear too much. Spoiler alert, I swear too much. But no, No, I mean, everybody, I never, I mean, I'm sure people
But I
are,
mean that in the
right,
nicest
yeah,
way,
yeah.
because that means you've written a character that we care about.
Yeah, yeah,
And I found myself so connected, and
Yeah.
I was rooting for something or someone.
Yeah.
Or thought it should be this way, and I think the criticism would come in the form of care for
Yeah.
the character. And I think that's such a testament to who you are as writers,
yeah,
that I give a crap about
Yeah.
it. You know, it's not just, I'm not passively reading, I'm rooting, or I'm assuming or thinking.
yeah.
And then it's dashed, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, well,
Yeah.
fine, let's see.
Lily, do people ever tell you that your female protagonists are unlikable?
Oh, well, yes, novel number 2,
Okay.
big
okay.
time.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was kind of before it was not cool to say that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
The English teacher.
The English teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did get that.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of being told that Rachel is an unreliable narrator. And
That's great. I mean, that's
well,
brilliant.
It is, and it is. But I also sort of want to say to them, actually, she's not really unreliable. You just don't like her very much, I think is what it is. You know, because she is, I mean, what 22-year-old girl is that likable? I mean, that would be weird.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, it's a similar
Well,
thing.
she's
We've got
also
these-
blotto drunk some of the time.
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah.
is
She's got a drinking
unreliable.
problem, so she's
Yeah.
unreliable. Yeah.
Well, now it's your turn. I would love to hear questions. They would love to answer the questions.
This is my favorite part. Yes. I would say the character in Writers and Lovers, that was similar to my journey for sure. I mean, I was really broke. I mean, her situation was worse than mine for sure. There were a number of elements that were worse. But I did live in a potting shed. But it was my sister's rental potting shed. And so, you know, I had more family around than poor Casey. And, but that trajectory of being broke and watching all your friends go off and get health insurance and work in offices, and then you start getting the invitations for the weddings and, you know, all of that. And like, I literally felt like everyone's ship was sailing but mine. And I didn't want to be on their ships, but I had no ship. And so there was, that's really why I wanted to write that book, because I just, you know, I so much wanted to say, stick with it, stay with your passions, don't give up, you know. And this was the only way I knew how to say it. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rachel's story is similar to mine in the sense that I started out in journalism, thinking that was what I wanted to do. I was an art major, but I was also editor on the newspaper, and so I had these kind of dueling lives, and I grew up in a writing family. My father's a writer, and so I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to be a writer. That's crazy. I'm not going to try to do what he does, and so I sort of wrote short stories in secret for years, and then when I was in my mid-30s, finally said to my husband, I think I'm going to write a novel, and just sat down and did it during my painting breaks, and that was kind of, but it was really kind of, I went through the whole, okay, I'm going to be a journalist. That's the proper way to be a writer. That's how you make money being a writer. That's how you get a paycheck. I don't even know if that's true anymore, but it seemed true in 2004 when I had that plan. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think Rachel comes to her true novelist self in this book sooner than I did. Yeah, but definitely there were some similarities.
Oh, that's interesting. So she's given this nickname early on. At first, before they meet her, they call her Daisy, and then they decide to switch over to Jordan. And it's mostly because Jordan Baker was a golf player in The Great Gatsby, and I think that's sort of the simple answer. I mean, I know that Jordan Baker in The Great Gatsby was a liar. She really was not a good person. And I have been asked, like, do you feel that way about your narrator? And I do not, and I did not mean that. I really just kind of superficially just meant them to switch from Daisy to Jordan. It's so funny because I always bring this with me because this cover, I didn't realize this when I first saw it. This was like the 30th cover that I saw. And I was like, oh, yes, finally. But what I didn't realize, and I sent it to my friend Anya. Do you know Anya Hansen?
No.
I sent it to her immediately.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, Gatsby.
Totally that cover.
I had no idea. I had no idea. I mean, the iconic thing, 10th grade.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about Gatsby a lot lately, and I think there's a lot of thematic similarities between the two books. I mean, the past and all this yearning for your first love and trying to, he's trying to sort of recapture and like repossess sort of thing. And she's not doing that, but there are big, big questions that she needs answers to and that he needs answers to. And so there is a lot of overlap with those two. I mean, again, if I had thought to myself, now you're writing young people and now you're writing old people, I probably would have frozen up. But I was just thinking about these people, and where they were in their lives. And so I started when they were young. And again, I mean, I just sort of imagined, like, partially time traveled back to how I felt at that time, and how it was in some way. I'm not really sure, but then it's just sort of an act of imagination to go back. I also have kids I have two girls in their 20s, and so I feel like I still have, a foot in the door in that world because I see them with their friends and everything. And then their lives, they get heavy and they have real worries and concerns and responsibilities. And when you put that on someone, their dialogue is different. They're carrying a lot. And so by the very nature of those things, they grow up, and they sound older because they're just more burdened. Not that they're any less happy necessarily. I would say that possibly for our main character, the opposite is true. I think her older years are much more peaceful in a lot of ways, but she's still carrying a lot. And in the third part, she is absolutely stretched in two opposite directions, and not to the point of breaking, but almost. Yeah, so thank you.
Kate, tell us a little bit about your capturing that youth, because you do it
Yeah.
in two different stages.
Yeah.
And how did you sort of place yourself in those different stages to make it come to life?
Yeah, I think dialogue number one is my absolute favorite thing to write. It's where I'm at my happiest. I tend to be like I'll write dialogue and then I'll have to kind of go back later and be like, okay, this is just a list of floating heads saying things, and so I gotta go back and put their bodies in here somehow. But particularly, I mean, within the junior high, it's just remembering really how cruel kids are and how awkward. And again, awkward is that's where I'm happy. I like to be in awkward situations in my head. And these kids are but they're it's like they're being driven by their own kind of selfish mania, and there are all these studies now about how it just is what it is. You can't talk them out of it. This is what their brains are at this time in life. Everything is overblown and everything sort of ends up being quite cruel. And one of the reasons that I started in junior high with this is because I think that's the first time in a kid's life when they're cruel on purpose. I mean, little kids can be cruel. I don't think they necessarily understand the ramifications of their actions. But in junior high, it's like, oh, I can hurt you. And I think I might try. And there are all these reasons for it. And Rachel's kind of, at one point, this was going to be called Edge of Cruelty, because it was kind of like this moment of when does Rachel herself cross over into making the decision to be cruel? And all of that happens through dialogue. And so there were several scenes that they just took ages to write. I mean, draft after draft after draft, because it's not, for me, instinctual. I don't like to think to be cruel. And so the first drafts are kind of, they're sort of like tiptoeing around the issue. And then, 5 or 6 drafts later, these kids are finally saying the cruel things to each other that they needed to be saying in draft 1. But I just couldn't get there because I didn't want it. I was, you sort of, your own, 13-year-old, 14-year-old trauma comes back and you're just like, what am I doing here? Yeah.
I have 2 middle schoolers at home.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you. I edit now as I go along. So like I'll write, maybe 3 or 4 pages in a day. And then the next day will start with me rereading those 3 or 4 pages. And then I'll add on to it another 3 and it just kind of goes like that. So it feels like, I mean, by the time I've printed it out and I'm trying to edit it, there's never really very much there because I'm constantly going back as I move forward at the same time. It's like always like 1 step forward, 2 steps back or something like that. And so when I give it to somebody else, I mean, I'm expecting and wanting like a lot of edits. I know there's some writers that are really, really quite frightened of it and they don't want it, but I've been so in my head for so long about this that if you're handing it back to me with almost nothing, then I'm just going to hand it to somebody else because it's just. So I really relish it. I mean, my agent does it, and then the editor does it, and then my husband does it. So it's just. It's so easy to think, oh, you've created this sort of like perfect world that makes sense within the world that you've written, and then somebody might, just not get it. And so it's important to just, have not only people editing your grammatical errors, but also like, this doesn't make sense,
How does that
Yeah.
make that feel for you?
Yeah, no, very. My process is very similar, except that I don't go back and read.
Oh.
I don't want. I just want to keep moving, and so I
That's
write
wise.
by hand.
Yeah.
And I just kind of glance at the last like paragraph that I wrote the day before, and then I move on, and then when I really have lost the thread, and I'm, I don't know, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 pages in, and then I need to kind of reconnect, then I put it on the computer. And so then I'm polishing it, I'm rewriting it and revising it while I'm putting it onto the computer. And so it's still a creative
It's kind
process.
of similar, because I'm not writing by hand, so you're kind of, So I'm
Yeah,
skipping that
that's
step.
true.
Yeah.
And then when I have a full draft, then I print it out and I read it. I try to take a break of at least a few days, and then I read it over and I write all over that draft, and then I type up all the changes. And sometimes I go back to my notebook to write a new scene, and then I type that up. And then it goes through that like probably 6 times before anyone sees it. And then same, I give it to my husband, I give it to my writers group, I give it to my agent and my editor. And I've done everything that I can see. I don't want to have feedback before. I have some friends who need feedback right away. Yeah. Like when it's raw and uncooked and you know that there are a lot of things you haven't done. Like, I don't want anyone to tell me what I already know. Yeah. I want to tell them to tell me things I don't know, and I'm desperate for that.
Exactly. When you're stuck, when you're like, I can't go any further. I need someone to tell me what to do.
And like you're saying, you think you have it, this all works, and then my writers group is like, where is she emotionally? Like, what is she feeling here? I remember my friend Susan was in writers group with this book in particular in the Paris sections, and she was like, I don't know what she's feeling. I don't know what she's feeling. And I remember being really mad, for like a week. And then I was like, God damn it, she's right. And I just went back in, and I had to like expand that whole section. I had just dialed it in because I didn't want to be in Paris. Because I'd already written a book about France, and I was like, why am I back here? But there were reasons that she had to be back there, and so, that can happen. Oh, it takes me anywhere. A first draft is usually somewhere between 11 months and 2 years, but it can really, really vary. And then it just depends how long the revision process is. But normally between books, it's between 4 and 6 years.
Yeah, I would say that for me that worked out about this. I started this one during the pandemic, like right at the beginning of the pandemic. I had started it, so I wrote the first draft of it really quickly because there was nothing else to do. But then it needed so many more drafts than I had ever anticipated. I remember, thinking, oh, this book will come out in 2023 or something that just ended up not being the case at all. So ultimately, it takes the time it takes, which is almost always longer than what you want.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's so nice. I wish I had brought some. I forgot. My husband had the idea to make cards for this game called Sir Hinkum Funny Buster that they play in the novel, and we got an artist friend of ours to paint many paintings for the cards, and they sell them at Kate's sister Emily's
Do they have them
store.
at the store?
Yes.
Oh,
and you can get them online.
I collect decks of cards. I need to go get one.
Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't bring you a pack.
That's all right. I'll go buy one.
We just want to come to Maine with you.
So yeah.
You do this up there next
Anyway, that store is called Print, and that's where you
Yes.
can get those.
Yeah.
But the game itself was taught to me when my kids were little, and I have dear friends named Electa and Joss. And I recently wrote like a little Vogue piece about Electa and Joss and how I met them. But they are dear, dear friends of mine, and our kids are really good friends. And Joss is a guy, and his dad's dad, and Joss's Poppy, taught Joss's dad the game like in the 30s. And so we think that Poppy learned it probably around the turn of the century. And it's kind of a game of manners, and Electa did some research and found that there used to be, in the 1800s, a board game called Sir Hinckley Funny Duster. And so, but somehow in their family, it became Sir Hinkum Funny Buster. And nobody else has ever heard of this game except for our family and their family. And we still play it. Like my grown-up kids, we were all on vacation with their boyfriends last Christmas. And we all 9 of us with my sister played this really fun game that is quite, it can be kind of rowdy. And anyway, on Instagram and on my website, there are instructions, and you can play with a regular deck of cards. And they're all, each suit is a family, and the hearts are Heart the Lover's family. So that's where this all came from. Thank you.
We're time. We're okay. We're up. It's your turn to meet them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.